We are learning Mishna Gittin, Parak Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishna Hey. We began it yesterday, so we'll just read quickly through the beginning. Call get sheishalav aid kusi paso. Any document that has on it a aid that is a kuthian is invalid. Chutz migitay noshim shechuri avadim, unless we're talking about bill of divorce for a woman or the bill of freedom for a slave. Ma'isa sheviu lefnei Gamliel lechvar isnai get isha. It occurred that they brought a get in front of Rabbi Gamliel to the village of Osnai. They brought him a bill of divorce for a woman. Both witnesses were Kuthians. The Hikshir, and he nonetheless said it's kosher. He validated the get. So we have in the beginning of the Mishnah machlokes as to whether one aid kusi is going to be kosher for a get or even two. Now this is where we're up to. All documents that are processed through the courts of idolaters, even though the witnesses signed are non-Jews, kasherim, nonetheless, those kinds of documents are still kosher. Other than if we're talking about a bill of divorce for a woman or a bill of freedom for a slave. Okay, so now let's go through this. The Mishnah says, if you're talking all shtaris that are processed in a non-Jewish court, even the witnesses that are assigned to the document are not Jews, nonetheless, it's kosher. The reason it's kosher is because, first of all, the kind of court and the witnesses we're talking about here are those that we know do not take bribes. So they don't take bribes, they can be trusted. Now, when it comes to general documents, like let's say an IOU, so the whole point of the document is to be evidence that something took place, that a loan took place. So if there's no reason to be concerned that the judges or the witnesses are not honest, you can believe them to say this took place. But if you're talking about a get, for a woman or a get shikra for a slave, so there the issue is that the witnesses are not there on the document, and the document is not just a evidence that something took place. On the contrary, it's the document that does what needs to be done. The divorce takes place through the document. The freedom takes place through the document. So being that you're talking about that's the document itself is what makes things happen here. That's exactly what makes the divorce, what makes the freedom. So then it's got to be that the witnesses are Jewish. It's got to be that's processed through those who have the laws who have these laws, which non-Jews don't, and therefore they don't have the Torah, and therefore they won't be good. So again, Gittin and freedom documents actually bring into effect the divorce or emancipation, or they get processed in a Jewish court has the power to do this. Okay, now Mishnah continues. Okay, now. So again, even though we could have reliable witnesses or reliable judges, it's not going to help, since it's the document itself that makes what's happening here. It's what makes the divorce, what makes the freedom. Therefore, those who sign it have to be kosher witnesses.
Certified.
It has to be kosher witnesses, not certified.
All right.
Kosher witnesses. Okay, now Reb Shimon says, Av eluk shemin. Even if we're talking about a bill of divorce for a woman or a bill of freedom for a servant, even they will be kosher if they have witnesses that are not Jewish. The only time it was ever mentioned that the non-Jewish witnesses would not be kosher for a bill of divorce is when it's done by hedget, when it's done by what we call hedget, we translate it as or made privately, meaning it wasn't done in a court. Theoretically, you don't need a court to do it to do a get. You could have two witnesses, they write it up, and it's done. You have a safer writing the get. Two witnesses are there, they sign to it, or two witnesses see it's being given over, and it's done. The thing is, though, that if you're talking about done by a hedget, meaning it was done privately, as they say, it wasn't done by a court, wasn't done officially, that can create a problem. Now, so there's two things here that have to be dealt with in Reb Shimon's opinion. First, Reb Shimon says it's kosher. Theoretically, it's kosher. There'll be times that it's kosher. How can a guy be a witness on a Jewish get when you need kosher witnesses to make the get valid? as we say. That's the whole point of the Tanna Kamma, the first opinion. It's the get itself that makes the freedom, that makes the divorce. And if so, the witnesses that make this document valid, have to be kosher witnesses. How can it be possible to say that with non-Jewish witnesses, the get would be kosher? So the first thing that has to be explained, as they bring that here in the bottom, is there's 2 points that have to be made. One point that has to be made is, do you really need witnesses to sign on a get? Do you really need it? So it's actually a machlekes Tanaim. It's a machlekes amongst the sages of the Mishnah, whether we say Eidei Chasima Karsi, it's the witnesses who sign that make the divorce happen, or it's Eidei Mesira Karsi, or it's the Eidim, that's the witnesses that see it being an over. That's what makes the divorce. That means, let's say you had a get, it was written up, there were no witnesses signing on it, but there were 2 witnesses who saw the husband give it to his wife. Would that be a kosher get? It's a machlekes. Now, if Reb Shimon is going to be saying, it's an argument amongst the Tanoim, amongst the sages. Some say it would be kosher, and some say no. You have to have witnesses signing on it to make it a kosher get, that it could affect the divorce. Now, if Reb Shimon says that it's possible for non-Jews to be able to be the witnesses on a get for a Jewish woman, he must hold that essentially these witnesses are not, the witnesses signing are not the witnesses that make the get, that make the bill of divorce into an effective bill of divorce. He has to hold that really they're not necessary, and the fact that you have 2 witnesses who saw the get the bill of divorce being given over from the husband to the wife, that's what affects the get. That's what affects the divorce. And therefore, in essence, the guy signing on it doesn't make a difference, essentially. Doesn't make a difference. As long as 2 kosher witnesses observed how the husband gave it over to the wife, that would make an effective get. Nonetheless, Reb Shimon still says that nonetheless, he still says that when you have signatures on it that are not Jewish, it's going to depend. Only if it's done in a court, meaning a non-Jewish court, but if it wasn't done in a court, it's not going to work. So the explanation to this part of Reb Shimon's opinion is the following. Even Reb Shimon holds that you don't have to have witnesses signing on the get, but typically you did. Typically you did. Why did you? Because if, let's say, the husband comes and says it's a forgery, it's not real, so then you have to find the witnesses who saw it being given over to come and say, no, it's legit. Now the problem is, though, that maybe you won't be able to find those witnesses. So therefore, what they did is, in being that you may not be able to find those witnesses, therefore there was a very common practice to have witnesses signing on it, because by signing on it, they're saying it's legitimate. So it was there, not that it was needed in the sense of affecting a kosher get, but it was there because if you couldn't find the witnesses who saw it being given over to authenticate it, you'd at least have the witnesses that were signing on it. Okay, at least you have them. At least you have them. Now, if at the end of the day the witnesses who sign on it, they serve a purpose of authenticating the get, then I don't want to come to authenticate a get through non-kosher witnesses. If the witnesses that signed it are goyim, I don't want to authenticate it through that. And out of the concern that it could happen that if the witnesses are non-Jewish, that you may come to authenticate the get through them, because that's what they're there for, to be able to say that this is a real get, it's not a forgery. So then that would be a reason that to actually invalidate the get because of that concern. So therefore, says Reb Shimon, if this get was done in a court, even in a non-Jewish court, when things happen in a non-Jewish court, the news gets around. People know that it's happened, which means people are going to know that this divorce was done by a non-Jewish court. And they're going to know that the witnesses signing on it are not Jewish. And therefore, they won't authenticate it through them. So if they're on it, no big deal. How can it be kosher? There are no Jewish witnesses. The Jewish witnesses saw it. That would make it kosher. And if at the end of the day there is a claim of forgery, you can't use the witnesses to authenticate it. You'd have to find the witnesses who actually saw it being given over. But if you're talking about, so that's why he says that there's only a problem if it was done privately. If it wasn't done in a court, it was done privately, so then you have to be concerned that, the 2 witnesses that signed on it are not Jewish. People are not going to know about that because it wasn't done in a court. and they come to authenticate the get based on their witnesses, based on these witnesses. And therefore, Shimon says that even if the witnesses are not kosher, are not Jewish, meaning they're not kosher witnesses, if the get can still be kosher, the bill of divorce can still be kosher, as long as it was done in a court, even in a non-Jewish court. But if it was done by privately, then if the witnesses that signed it are not Jewish, it's not going to be kosher. Based on the explanation we gave before, in the case it was done privately, they may come to authenticate it based on these witnesses, and therefore, Rabbi Shimon says in that case, we don't even allow the get to be used. But if it was done in a court where people where people find out and hear and know the whole story, they'll know not to authenticate it, and therefore it'll still be a kosher get as long as it was given in front of two kosher witnesses. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ruben.